The sky that morning was the color of bruised steel, the kind of gray that pressed against the windows and made the city feel smaller, lonelier. Olivia Carter sat in the corner of the lawyer's office, her hands gripping the edges of her handbag like it was the only solid thing left in her world. Outside, rain streaked the glass, the droplets merging and sliding down in slow, quiet rivers. Inside, the ticking of a large clock filled the silence, steady, cruel, indifferent to the collapse of a marriage that had once been full of laughter and late-night dreams. The papers before her looked harmless at first glance, just ink, legal terms, signatures. But each sentence seemed to whisper the same truth. It's over. Across the mahogany desk sat Julian Pierce, the man she had once called her entire future, the man whose eyes used to find hers across a crowded room with an understanding that needed no words. Today his gaze was distant, buried somewhere beneath layers of exhaustion and pride. His suit was immaculate as always, his tie perfectly straight, but his face looked carved from stone. Olivia wanted to speak, to reach out one last time and ask him if this was really what he wanted. But every time she looked at him, the memory of the last few months came rushing back. The arguments that started small and ended in silence, the empty seat beside her at dinner, the messages he no longer answered, the way he began talking about work as though it were oxygen. Somewhere between business meetings and new investments, she had stopped existing in his world, becoming an echo that faded whenever he walked into a room. And yet, sitting here, she still loved him. That terrible, unshakable love that refused to die even when it had been starved for months. The lawyer cleared his throat, pushing the pen toward her. "Whenever you're ready, Mrs. Carter." The words landed like a verdict. Her hand trembled as she took the pen. For a moment, the room blurred, and she could almost see their wedding day again. The way Julian had smiled when he saw her walking down the aisle, the way he had promised forever in a voice that shook with sincerity. Now the same hand that had placed a ring on her finger waited for her to end it all with a signature. She signed her name slowly, every curve of ink cutting deeper into her heart. When she looked up, Julian had already taken the pen. His expression didn't change as he signed his own name, his movements brisk, efficient, businesslike. When the papers were stacked neatly again, he stood. "Take care, Olivia," he said, the words polite but hollow. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. He left the room without looking back, and when the door closed, the sound echoed like thunder in her chest. For several minutes, she didn't move. The air felt heavy, pressing down on her shoulders. When she finally stood, her knees wobbled. She managed to thank the lawyer, though her voice cracked and somehow made it out into the rain. The cold hit her immediately, sharp and cleansing, but it did nothing to wash away the ache that spread through her ribs. She walked without direction, her heels splashing through puddles until she found herself in a small cafe she didn't remember entering. She ordered tea but didn't drink it, staring at the rising steam as tears blurred her vision. The barista gave her a sympathetic smile, the kind that said, "I don't know what's wrong, but I can tell you're breaking." Olivia nodded faintly, pretending to be fine. Hours later, back in the small apartment she and Julian had shared, the silence was unbearable. His things were already gone, the closet half empty, the framed photo of their honeymoon missing from the dresser. She sat on the edge of the bed, feeling like a ghost haunting the remains of her own life. That's when she remembered the test in her purse, the one she had taken that morning before leaving for the lawyer's office. For a moment she froze, her breath catching in her throat. Slowly she pulled it out, still wrapped in the same crumpled tissue. Two faint pink lines stared back at her. Positive. The world tilted. She pressed her hand to her mouth, a sound between a sob and a laugh escaping her. "Now?" she whispered. "Now after everything?" Tears blurred her vision as she clutched the test. It felt like a cruel joke from fate. For years they had tried. Fertility treatments, consultations, nights spent holding each other through disappointment. And now, when she was completely alone, life had decided to grow inside her. The irony cut deep. She thought of Julian's face that morning, the cold distance in his voice. She couldn't tell him. Not after the way he had walked away, not after how easily he had let her go. He was too wrapped in his world of meetings and mergers to notice a heartbeat that hadn't even started yet. She sat there for a long time, staring at the test, feeling anger, grief, and a strange sense of defiance swirl together. Then slowly she tore it in half, not out of denial but as an act of protection. This child, this unexpected spark of life, would be hers and hers alone. That night, Olivia packed what was left of her belongings. Every object carried a memory. The coffee mug they bought at a street fair, the blanket they had argued over in the store, the photo of them dancing in the rain. She stopped at that one, holding it in her hands. They had been soaked, laughing like children, with no idea how fragile happiness could be. She traced his face in the picture with her thumb before setting it aside. Some things, she decided, were too heavy to carry into the next chapter. She closed the final box and stood in the middle of the room. The apartment looked hollow now, stripped of laughter and warmth. The silence had a pulse of its own. Before leaving, she turned off the lights and whispered, "Goodbye." The word felt final. The following weeks passed in fragments. Morning sickness, paperwork, job applications. Olivia moved to a quieter part of town, renting a small one-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of lavender and paint. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She began freelancing as a graphic designer, taking small projects online. Her friend Rebecca, the kind of person who could find humor even in tragedy, became her anchor. Rebecca was there through everything: doctor visits, long nights, and the moments when fear threatened to drown her. When the baby kicked for the first time, Olivia cried. For the first time in months, her tears weren't from sadness, but from awe. Something beautiful was growing out of the ruins. When Emma was born, the hospital room filled with sunlight that poured through the window like a blessing. She was tiny, fragile, perfect. A miracle with Julian's green eyes and Olivia's stubborn little frown. The first time Olivia held her, something inside her shifted forever. Every scar, every heartbreak, every unanswered question suddenly made sense. She had been walking through darkness to reach this moment of light. Looking down at her daughter, she whispered, "You're my new beginning." From that day on, every decision Olivia made centered around Emma. She worked late into the night, often with the baby sleeping beside her in a bassinet, designing logos and posters for clients who never knew her story. The years that followed were not easy, but they were full. Their small house, she eventually managed to buy one, a modest blue cottage with white trim, became a sanctuary. There was laughter again, not the old kind tied to someone else, but the kind that came from peace. Olivia learned to plant roses in the front yard, to paint clouds on Emma's bedroom ceiling, to cook pancakes shaped like hearts every Sunday morning. Emma grew fast, full of questions, full of life. When she asked about her father, Olivia always paused before answering.
"He lives far away," she would say gently.
"Maybe one day you'll meet him." And Emma, with the innocence of childhood, would accept that, her attention already shifting to her next adventure. Meanwhile, somewhere across the city, Julian Pierce built the empire he had always dreamed of. His name appeared in business magazines. His company was the talk of the real estate world, and yet, the more success he achieved, the more hollow it all felt. He would stand by the window of his penthouse at night, staring at the skyline, remembering the woman he had lost. He told himself it was for the best, that she was better off without him. But the silence of his apartment whispered otherwise. Sometimes in the middle of a meeting, a scent or a phrase would bring her back so vividly that he'd lose his train of thought. He missed her laugh, the way she challenged him, the way she made everything feel real. But pride is a stubborn thing, and regret often arrives too late. 6 years passed before fate decided they had learned enough from their separation. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, ordinary and unremarkable at first. Julian's driver took a wrong turn, ending up near a school just as the final bell rang. Children spilled out laughing, calling to their parents. Julian, distractedly checking emails, happened to glance up and froze. There she was, Olivia. She looked different, softer somehow, with her hair tied back and a calm light in her eyes. And beside her, holding her hand, was a little girl with dark curls and a laugh that reached all the way to him. He couldn't look away. The girl turned, and for a second, Julian saw his own eyes reflected back. His heart stopped. The world around him blurred as the realization hit. The child could be his. He watched as Olivia helped the girl into a car, kissed her forehead, and drove away. He couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. That night he couldn't sleep. Memories collided with the present. The timeline, the silence, the day of their divorce. Everything fit. He felt anger, confusion, grief, but above all, an ache he couldn't describe. Somewhere out there, a little girl who shared his blood was growing up without him. He had missed her first words, her first steps, every birthday candle she had ever blown out. He sat in the dark, staring out at the city lights that now felt meaningless. For years he had chased success, but now he realized what he truly wanted was something he had already lost. And for the first time in his life, Julian Pierce, the man who always had control, didn't know what to do next. That night marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Because love, even when buried beneath time and pride, has a way of finding its way back. And the rain that once marked their ending was about to lead them both toward a second chance neither of them saw coming. For 3 nights after seeing Olivia and the little girl outside the school, Julian could barely close his eyes. Sleep was something he had never struggled with before. It came as easily as his next business deal, a habit of efficiency. But now every time he tried to rest, his mind replayed the same scene again and again. The tiny hand wrapped around Olivia's fingers, the light in her smile, the unmistakable spark of life that looked so much like his own reflection. He had built a world on numbers, contracts, and control, yet one glimpse of a child's eyes had reduced him to a man drowning in questions. Was she his? Why hadn't Olivia told him? What had he missed in those final months that could have changed everything? He sat in his penthouse surrounded by the quiet hum of luxury, the glass walls, the scent of imported coffee, the silent echo of emptiness, and for the first time in years, he felt small inside his own success. By the 4th day, the questions turned into an ache he could no longer ignore. He called his assistant, rescheduled meetings, and drove himself for once. No chauffeur, no calendar alerts, no barriers between him and what he needed to face. The city blurred past his windows. The same city he had conquered in boardrooms but somehow lost in heart. He didn't have a plan, only a name and a memory. He parked a few streets away from the small blue house the investigator had mentioned, sitting behind the wheel for nearly an hour before gathering the courage to step out. The neighborhood was nothing like the places he used to take Olivia when they were married. No luxury shops or gleaming towers, just tree-lined streets, bicycles, and driveways, and the sound of children's laughter somewhere nearby. The blue house stood quietly among others, with flower boxes under its windows, their colors bright against the white trim. It looked peaceful. Julian walked to the front gate and paused. Every instinct in him screamed that this was wrong. He couldn't just appear after 6 years and expect forgiveness or explanations. But the thought of his daughter, kept him moving. He didn't ring the bell immediately. Instead, he watched the small details that revealed a life he had never been part of. The chalk drawings on the sidewalk, the tiny pink rain boots by the door, the bicycle leaning against the fence. All proof of a childhood he hadn't seen grow. He was still standing there when the sound of a car door made him turn. Olivia was walking up the street, a grocery bag in each arm, her hair pulled loose by the breeze. She froze when she saw him. For a long moment, neither spoke, the years of distance stretching between them like a canyon. "Julian," she said finally, her voice quiet but sharp with disbelief. He swallowed hard, his pulse loud in his ears. "Hi, Liv." The nickname slipped out before he could stop it. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she looked away. "What are you doing here?" Her tone wasn't angry, more tired, guarded, like a woman who had spent too long rebuilding her peace to risk it now. He hesitated. "I saw you the other day, near the school." He forced a breath. "I needed to see you. To talk." Olivia's expression tightened. "You shouldn't be here, Julian." She stepped closer to the porch, setting the bags down. "You can't just appear after 6 years like nothing happened." "I know," he said quickly, his voice breaking with the weight of everything he hadn't said. "I know I have no right. But Liv, Olivia, please. The little girl. The one with you, is she—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The rest of the words dissolved in his throat. Her eyes softened, but only slightly. "Her name is Emma," she said, every syllable deliberate. "And yes, she's yours." For a moment the world seemed to tilt. Julian felt the air rush from his lungs, his vision blurring. All the years, all the success, all the empty nights, none of it mattered. He had a daughter. A living, breathing part of him had existed all this time without his knowledge. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice cracked like a man begging for understanding rather than accusing. Olivia looked away, her eyes glistening. "Because you weren't the same man anymore. The last months before we divorced, you were somewhere else. Every conversation ended with you walking out or shutting down. I couldn't bring a child into that." Julian wanted to argue, but the truth of her words hit too hard. He remembered the endless nights when he had chosen his phone over her voice, meetings over meals, ambition over affection. He had thought he was building their future, but he'd been building walls instead. "I would have wanted to know," he whispered. "I know," she said softly. "And maybe I should have told you. But at that time I didn't trust you to care. I had to protect her and myself." The wind moved through the trees, carrying the sound of children laughing somewhere down the block. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Olivia's gaze drifted toward the house, her hand unconsciously resting over her heart. "She doesn't know," she said finally. "About you? I told her father lives far away. That's all." Julian's chest tightened. "Can I see her?" "Not yet," Olivia replied, her voice gentle but firm. "She's too young to understand what this would mean. I need time to figure out how to tell her." He nodded slowly, the weight of guilt pressing down on him. "All right, however long it takes. But please don't shut me out. I want to be part of her life. I want to make this right." Olivia studied him for a long moment, searching his face for sincerity. What she saw there wasn't the man who had once chosen ambition over love. It was someone older, wearier, stripped of arrogance, a man who finally realized what mattered. She sighed. "I don't know if you can make it right, Julian. But if you mean what you say, we can start small. Maybe—" She hesitated, then continued. "Maybe coffee next week, we talk. No promises." He nodded again, gratitude flooding through him. "I'll be there." When he left that day, the air felt different, heavy with memory but tinged with the faintest shimmer of hope. Olivia stood by the window after he drove away, her reflection pale in the glass. Her heart pounded with confusion. For 6 years she had convinced herself she didn't need closure, that the chapter was finished. But seeing him again had shaken something loose. He looked older, yes, but there was remorse in his eyes, a rawness that hadn't been there before. Still, she reminded herself, remorse was not enough to erase pain. That night, as she tucked Emma into bed, her daughter's innocent voice pierced her thoughts. "Mommy, who was that man today? The one outside?" Olivia froze. "You saw him?" Emma nodded sleepily. He looked at the flowers and smiled. He seemed nice. Olivia brushed her fingers through Emma's curls, her heart tightening. "He's just someone Mommy used to know, sweetheart. Will he come back?" Emma asked, yawning. Olivia hesitated, then whispered, "Maybe. But no matter what happens, you're safe, always." After Emma fell asleep, Olivia sat in the quiet glow of the nightlight, watching her daughter breathe. She realized that life had brought her full circle, back to the man she once loved and lost. But this time with a choice, to protect the peace she had built or to open the door to forgiveness. The next week came faster than she expected. When Julian arrived at the small cafe downtown, she was already there, her hair tied back, a notebook open beside her coffee. He stood at the doorway for a moment, remembering how many mornings they had shared like this years ago before everything went wrong. She looked up and caught his gaze, offering a small, cautious smile. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. They talked for hours, about work, about Emma, about the strange way life had reshaped them both. Julian listened more than he spoke, realizing how much he had missed by never truly listening before. Olivia noticed the change in him, too. The sharp edges of pride had worn away, replaced by humility. He admitted his mistakes without excuses. When he spoke about wanting to be part of Emma's life, his voice carried the kind of sincerity that could only come from regret turned into purpose. By the time they left the cafe, the sun was setting, painting the sky with the same golden tones that had once framed their happiest memories. Julian walked her to her car, not out of formality, but out of something gentler, respect. "Thank you for meeting me," he said quietly. Olivia nodded, her expression unreadable. "Let's see where this goes, Julian." For Emma's sake, he smiled faintly. For hers. And maybe ours too. As he watched her drive away, Julian realized that rebuilding love wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning from it, accepting the scars and choosing to do better each day. And as the city lights flickered on, he finally understood that sometimes the hardest roads, the ones paved with mistakes and time, were the ones that led you home. The following days moved like a quiet tide between two lives that had once been one. Julian began to rearrange his world in ways no business consultant could have planned. The board meetings that used to stretch into the night were now shortened. His assistant noticed how often he stared at his phone, lost in thought, and how his tone softened when he spoke of personal matters. It was as though the armor of success he had worn for years was finally beginning to crack, revealing the man who had always existed beneath the marble surface of achievement. He still carried guilt like a shadow, but for the first time, that guilt was not paralyzing. It was a compass pointing him toward something better. Olivia, meanwhile, found herself walking a path she never expected to tread again. The sight of Julian sitting across from her at the cafe had stirred memories she had spent 6 years burying under daily responsibilities and quiet evenings. She told herself she had agreed to meet him only for Emma's sake, yet there was an unspoken truth humming beneath that justification. Part of her wanted to know if people could truly change. She had seen him in glossy magazines, a symbol of triumph and ambition. Yet the man she met that day was not the one who had left her years ago. He was quieter, humbler, as though life had finally taught him what his heart had failed to grasp before, that love, once lost, cannot be replaced by success. Days turned into weeks, and they met again. The first few meetings were cautious, each conversation like walking across thin ice. They discussed practical things, Emma's schooling, Olivia's work, his schedule, all while avoiding the heavier subjects that still lingered in the air. But with each passing encounter, their words began to loosen. Julian found himself listening, really listening, as Olivia spoke about the small victories and struggles of raising Emma alone. The first time she took her to the doctor, the nights she stayed up working while the child slept beside her, the fear that she would never be enough. He sat silently through her confessions, every story deepening his respect and remorse. He had missed all of it. The moments that shaped his daughter's laughter, the milestones that turned her from a newborn into a little girl full of imagination. One evening, after a long conversation, Olivia agreed that he could finally meet Emma. The decision weighed heavily on her, yet she sensed it was time. "She deserves to know who you are," she said quietly. "But please, Julian, don't make promises you can't keep. She's not just a child. She's my entire world." Her words struck him deeply, and he nodded with conviction. "I won't let her down," he replied, and this time she believed him. The day of their meeting arrived on a golden Saturday afternoon. Olivia had spent the morning trying to appear calm, but her nerves betrayed her every time she checked the clock. Emma was outside, sitting cross-legged in the garden, drawing butterflies on the patio with colored chalk. When Julian's car appeared at the corner of the street, Olivia's heart raced. She opened the door before he could knock. He stood there in simple clothes, no expensive watch, no pretense, just a man carrying a bouquet of daisies and a soft smile that seemed uncertain of its welcome. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she replied. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Olivia stepped aside. "She's in the garden." Julian walked toward the back of the house, his heartbeat loud in his ears. The sunlight spilled across the grass, and there she was, a small figure with dark curls humming softly as she drew. She looked up at the sound of footsteps. "Mommy, who's that?" Olivia knelt beside her. "Emma, sweetheart, this is Mr. Julian. He's an old friend of Mommy's." Emma tilted her head curiously, her green eyes, his eyes, studying him. "Hi, Mr. Julian," she said with a shy smile. Julian knelt to her level, his throat tightening. "Hi, Emma, I like your drawings. That butterfly looks amazing," she grinned proudly. "Thank you. Do you like butterflies too?" He smiled, blinking back the sting in his eyes. "I do now." What followed was something quiet and miraculous, and a child's openness meeting a father's longing. Julian spent the afternoon helping her paint a birdhouse, listening as she chattered about school, her best friend, her favorite bedtime stories. Every laugh she gave felt like sunlight seeping into the cold corners of his soul. Olivia watched from the kitchen window, torn between disbelief and emotion. For 6 years she had imagined this moment in 1,000 different ways, some painful, some impossible. But the reality was simpler and more beautiful. Emma had accepted him without question, as children often do when kindness is genuine. When evening came, Emma insisted he stay for dinner. They ate spaghetti and laughed when she spilled sauce on her shirt. After dessert, Julian helped her clean up her paints and carry her drawings inside. Before bedtime, she looked up at him and asked, "Will you come back tomorrow?" Julian glanced at Olivia, who hesitated before nodding slightly. If your mom says it's okay, I'd love to, he said. Good. Emma smiled, wrapping her small arms around his neck in an innocent hug that nearly broke him. It lasted only a second, but for Julian it felt like redemption itself. After Emma fell asleep, Olivia and Julian sat on the porch under a soft evening breeze. The sky was deep purple, the air rich with the scent of rain-damp earth. Neither spoke at first. There was too much between them for easy words. Finally, Olivia broke the silence. "You were good with her," she said softly. Julian looked at his hands. "I was terrified. I didn't know how to be around her, but she made it easy." Olivia smiled faintly. "She has that effect on people. She's her own little light." He turned to her, his voice low. "You gave her everything I couldn't. You gave her love, safety. I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful for that." She met his gaze, and for a long moment neither looked away. There was no sudden forgiveness, no cinematic reconciliation, just two people who had learned through pain and time what love truly meant. In that silence, a fragile peace began to form between them. Over the following months, Julian became a steady presence. He didn't push, didn't demand, didn't try to rewrite the past. He helped Emma with her school projects, attended her dance recitals, and brought her small gifts that made her laugh. Not expensive ones, but thoughtful, meaningful things. Olivia watched carefully, expecting him to falter, but he didn't. He was patient, kind, and consistent, slowly earning both of their trust. Sometimes when she saw him kneeling in the grass beside Emma, helping her build a tiny fort or teaching her how to fly a kite, Olivia would feel something warm stir inside her, something she had long buried under fear. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Julian stayed a little longer. They talked on the porch again, the way they used to when they were young and dreaming. The air was cool and fireflies blinked across the yard. "Do you ever think about us?" he asked quietly. Olivia didn't answer right away. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I also remember how much it hurt." "I know," he said. "And I can't undo that. But I'd like the chance to build something new. Not the same as before, something better built on honesty this time." Her eyes softened. "Julian, I don't know if I can go through that again." He nodded. "I'll wait," he said simply. "However long it takes. I'll wait, because this time I finally understand what love means. It isn't about owning or proving. It's about staying even when it's hard." His words lingered long after he left. That night, as Olivia stood by the window watching the quiet street below, she realized that forgiveness wasn't a single act. It was a journey. And maybe, just maybe, they were finally walking that road together. The days that followed were not perfect, but they were real. Julian became part of their rhythm. School mornings, weekend outings, quiet dinners that sometimes felt almost like family again. Emma began to draw 3 figures instead of 2 when she made her stick figure pictures. Mommy, me, and Mr. Julian. Olivia never corrected her. Deep inside, she knew that life had a way of mending what once seemed irreparable. Not through magic, but through the quiet persistence of love that refuses to give up. And so, as autumn painted the trees in shades of amber and gold, their lives began to blend in gentle harmony. The hurt remained, but it no longer defined them. Olivia found herself smiling more, laughing more, believing once again that sometimes broken things are not meant to be discarded. They are meant to be rebuilt with stronger hands and wiser hearts. Winter crept over the city quietly, replacing the bright gardens of summer with a hush that seemed to ask everyone to slow down. Inside the blue-trimmed house, warmth glowed from every corner. The soft light of a lamp, the scent of cinnamon, the quiet rustle of pages as Emma turned through one of her storybooks. Olivia sat at the dining table, laptop open, designing a new logo for a client. She glanced up now and then at the child humming beside her, still amazed by how much joy one small person could fill into an ordinary evening. What she didn't say out loud, even to herself, was that the house felt different these days, steadier, more alive, because another presence had quietly become part of their world again. Julian had not only kept his promises, but exceeded them in small, consistent ways. The school pickups when Olivia's deadlines ran long, the Saturday pancakes that always ended with flour on Emma's nose, the unspoken respect he showed by never stepping beyond the boundaries she set. He had stopped being a visitor and had slowly become family, though neither of them dared to name it. One evening in December, the three of them decorated a small Christmas tree that Emma had insisted on buying from a roadside stall. The house was filled with laughter and the crackle of the fireplace. Julian lifted Emma onto his shoulder so she could place the star at the top, and her delighted squeal filled the room. Olivia watched them, her chest tightening with an emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Something warm, dangerous, and familiar. When the lights were finally plugged in and the tree glowed softly, Emma clapped her hands. "It's perfect," she declared, running to fetch her sketchbook so she could draw the scene before bedtime. Julian turned toward Olivia, his expression soft in the glow of the lights. "She's incredible," he said quietly. "She has your imagination." Olivia smiled faintly. "She has your eyes." Their gazes met for a heartbeat that felt like a held breath. Not longing, not regret, but something fragile and hopeful. The weeks that followed were marked by a new kind of rhythm. They attended Emma's winter recital together, sitting side by side in the small auditorium. Julian's hand brushed hers accidentally when the lights dimmed, and neither of them moved it away right away. When Emma stepped onto the stage, dressed as a tiny snowflake, Julian felt tears sting his eyes. Not from sadness, but from the wonder of witnessing something he once believed he had lost forever. After the performance, Emma ran into his arms, beaming with pride, and Olivia stood nearby, realizing that her daughter had never looked happier. That night, after Julian drove them home, he lingered by the gate. "I don't know if I've ever said it properly," he began, his breath visible in the cold air. "But thank you, Olivia, for raising her, for being strong when I wasn't." She shook her head. "I did what I had to do. You're here now. That's what matters." He wanted to tell her more, to say that she was the reason he had rediscovered what love truly meant, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he simply said, "Good night," and the unspoken filled the space between them. As the months passed, Olivia noticed changes in herself as much as in him. She was lighter now, laughing more freely, no longer flinching at the idea of vulnerability. Healing, she realized, was not about erasing scars, but learning to see them as proof of survival. Julian, too, had transformed in quiet ways. His empire still demanded his attention, but his priorities had shifted. He began turning down late-night meetings, taking weekends off, choosing to invest in moments rather than money. The media still called him ruthless and driven, but the people who knew him, the small circle that included Olivia and Emma, saw the truth. A man learning how to live for something other than success. One Friday evening, a storm rolled through the city. The wind rattled the windows and the rain drummed against the roof in steady waves. Olivia and Emma were in the living room building a blanket fort when the power suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness. Emma squealed in delight rather than fear, grabbing a flashlight. "It's an adventure," she shouted. Olivia laughed, relieved by her daughter's courage. A moment later, there was a knock at the door. Julian, drenched from the rain, holding a bag of groceries. "I thought you might need supplies," he said, brushing water from his hair. Olivia shook her head with amusement. "You're going to catch a cold," she scolded, but her tone was soft. The kind used for someone you care about more than you admit. They spent the evening together by candlelight, cooking pasta on the gas stove and telling stories while the storm howled outside. Emma fell asleep inside the fort, her head resting on a pillow embroidered with tiny stars. Julian and Olivia sat nearby, the flickering candle casting warm shadows on their faces. "It feels like the old days," he said quietly. She glanced at him. "Except this time we know what we almost lost." He nodded, his voice low. "I don't ever want to lose it again." For the first time, she didn't look away. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was full of everything they didn't need to say. When the storm finally passed, they stepped outside. The air smelled of wet earth and renewal. The streetlights glistened on puddles, and somewhere in the distance a train horn echoed softly. Olivia stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself. Julian joined her, his coat draped over her shoulders without a word. They stood there, two souls who had walked through years of distance only to find themselves standing side by side again in the quiet aftermath of life's tempests. Olivia turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you think people can really start over?" Julian met her gaze, the reflection of streetlights in his eyes. "I think sometimes we don't start over," he said slowly. "We just keep walking from where we broke, but this time holding each other's hands. In the days that followed, something subtle but powerful shifted between them. There were no declarations, no dramatic confessions, only gestures that spoke louder. The way he made her coffee exactly how she liked it. The way she texted him reminders to eat. The way their laughter blended naturally when Emma did something funny. The wall between them had begun to crumble, replaced by a bridge built of forgiveness and understanding. Still, both were cautious. They knew love rebuilt too quickly could crumble again, but they also knew that genuine change takes time, and this time they were not in a rush. Spring arrived with a gentler light. Emma's 6th birthday was approaching, and Olivia planned a small garden party. Julian offered to help, and together they transformed the backyard with strings of fairy lights, balloons, and a handmade sign that read, "Happy Birthday, Emma." When the day arrived, the garden filled with laughter, music, and the scent of freshly baked cupcakes. Emma beamed with joy, running between guests, her curls bouncing. Olivia caught sight of Julian standing by the fence, quietly watching their daughter blow out her candles. His eyes shone, and she realized that he wasn't just proud, he was grateful, profoundly so, for a chance life rarely gave twice. That evening, after everyone left and the last balloon drifted lazily under the porch light, Olivia and Julian sat together, surrounded by the soft chaos of wrapping paper and cake crumbs. "She's happy," he said almost to himself. "Really happy." Olivia nodded. "She is, and so am I." Most days. He looked at her, searching her face for what that meant. "And the other days?" he asked gently. She smiled faintly. "Those are the days I still remember the old pain. But then I look at what we have now, and it reminds me that some endings are necessary to create better beginnings." Julian reached out, hesitant but sincere, taking her hand. "Then let's keep building those beginnings," he said. His grip was warm, grounding. Olivia didn't pull away. She let his fingers intertwine with hers, realizing that forgiveness wasn't a gift you gave someone once. It was something you chose again and again, until the hurt lost its power. In that quiet, surrounded by the soft remnants of their daughter's laughter, something inside her finally healed. As night settled over the city, the little blue house stood glowing gently beneath the moonlight. Inside, a woman who had once signed away her marriage sat beside the man she had once lost, both of them wiser, gentler, and more human than before. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years it no longer frightened her. Because love, real love, wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about walking through it together and still finding the courage to stay. Summer unfolded over the city like a gentle exhale, the kind that smells of blooming jasmine and distant laughter. The little blue house stood quietly among its neighbors, framed by the garden that Olivia and Emma had tended with their own hands. The roses were in full bloom now, their colors spilling like paint over the fence, and wind chimes whispered softly under the porch roof. Inside, life had settled into a rhythm that no longer felt borrowed or temporary. It was a home again, not the house of heartbreak it had once been, but a place where laughter returned, where the morning light carried warmth instead of loneliness. Julian's presence had woven itself naturally into their days. There was no grand announcement, no sudden declaration. It simply happened, the way dawn replaces night, slowly, quietly, and all at once. Each morning began with simple rituals that felt sacred. The smell of coffee brewing, Emma's feet pattering down the hallway, Olivia's soft hum as she prepared breakfast. Julian would arrive early on weekends, sleeves rolled up, bringing a box of fresh croissants from the bakery down the street. He had learned to love the ordinary, the kind of love that isn't about fireworks but about peace. The ambitious tycoon who once lived in glass towers now found joy in mowing the lawn, fixing a leaky faucet, or sitting on the porch reading while Emma tried to braid his hair with wild daisies. He laughed more easily now, his laughter deep and genuine, and Olivia often caught herself smiling at the sound without even realizing it. Yet even as peace returned, both of them knew that true healing required more than time. It required the courage to face what had once broken them. One evening, after putting Emma to bed, they sat together in the living room. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock that had survived every chapter of their story. Olivia looked at it thoughtfully. "That clock used to drive me crazy," she said softly. "Every tick felt like a reminder of how slowly time moved when we were falling apart." Julian smiled faintly. "And now?" She hesitated, her gaze warm. Now it reminds me that time doesn't stop, even when we think we can't survive something. It just keeps moving, and somehow so do we. Her words hung in the air like a prayer. Julian leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. Liv, he began, using the name that had once belonged only to their happiest days. I spent years chasing everything I thought would make me proud, but all it gave me was noise. It wasn't until I saw you again, saw Emma, that I realized success means nothing without peace. You were my peace. You always were. His voice trembled, not from weakness but from honesty. I don't expect forgiveness for everything. I just want the chance to keep showing up. For you, for her, for us. Olivia's eyes glistened, and for a moment she couldn't speak. The years of silence between them seemed to dissolve, replaced by understanding. You already are showing up, she whispered. That's all I ever wanted. Not perfection. Just presence. She reached out, her hand brushing against his, a gesture so simple and yet so full of grace that it felt like a vow. In that touch was every word they didn't need to say. I forgive you. I still believe in what we could be. The next months became a season of gentle rebuilding. Julian sold his penthouse downtown, choosing to live closer to the neighborhood that now felt like home. He still worked hard, but his life no longer revolved around endless ambition. He and Olivia began to share more of the small joys that had once defined their love. Sunday morning walks to the farmer's market, late-night talks on the porch, movie nights with Emma tucked between them under a blanket. Sometimes, when Olivia caught him looking at her across the table, she would see the same spark that had drawn her to him years ago. But now it was steadier, wiser, stripped of pride. He had learned that love wasn't about possessing someone. It was about protecting the space where they could both grow. Emma thrived under the quiet strength of their new life. She adored her father with the pure affection only a child could give, completely without hesitation. She told her friends at school that her family took the long way home, and Olivia could never correct her because, in truth, that was exactly what they had done. They had taken the long way through heartbreak, distance, and regret, only to find themselves arriving back where they were meant to be, together. One late afternoon, they decided to plant a tree in the backyard, a maple that Emma had chosen herself. So it can grow with us, she said proudly, handing Julian the small shovel. The sunlight bathed them in gold as they worked side by side, laughter echoing softly across the yard. When the hole was finally filled and the young tree stood straight and steady, Olivia stepped back, wiping her hands on her jeans. There, she said, smiling. Something new planted where the old pain used to live. Julian looked at her, his heart swelling with quiet gratitude. Something that will keep growing, he said. Just like us. That evening, as twilight fell, they sat under the porch roof watching the first stars appear. Emma lay asleep on a blanket nearby, her hair fanned out like a halo. The air was filled with the scent of earth and summer rain, and the world felt still in that perfect kind of silence that needs no words. Olivia turned toward Julian, her voice soft. Do you ever think about how different everything might have been if we hadn't fallen apart? He nodded slowly. All the time, but maybe we had to break to learn how to build right. She smiled, the kind of smile that comes from peace, not perfection. Then let's keep building, she said. He reached for her hand, fingers intertwining with hers in the familiar rhythm of something rediscovered. Always, he murmured. And there, under the quiet glow of their porch light, surrounded by the hum of crickets and the faint rustle of their new maple tree, two souls who had once lost everything found the courage to begin again, not as the people they were before, but as the people life had taught them to become. In the years that followed, the little blue house became a witness to countless memories. Birthdays and laughter, quiet mornings with coffee steaming between their hands, evenings when Emma's laughter filled the yard while her parents danced slowly to a song only they could hear. Time moved gently, painting gray into Julian's hair and adding depth to Olivia's eyes, but their love remained steady, a quiet flame that never sought to burn the world, only to keep the cold away. They had walked through storms, lost themselves, and found their way back, not to the past, but to a new beginning shaped by forgiveness and grace. And if you had stood outside their window years later, you would have seen a family sitting around a dinner table lit by warm light, a woman whose strength had rebuilt her world, a man who had learned humility through loss, and a little girl whose laughter had healed them both. You would have heard the echo of a truth simple yet eternal. Sometimes life takes everything away so that it can give you back what truly matters, purified by time and touched by mercy. Because in the end, love is not a fairy tale of perfect moments. It is a series of second chances, small choices, and the courage to keep choosing each other, even after the rain. And in that small blue house on an ordinary street where dreams once broke and bloomed again, Olivia, Julian, and Emma built something far stronger than the life they lost. They built a home.